Adoptive parents, what's the most heartbreaking thing your foster child thought was normal? Mine was Theo, and he thought it was normal to eat the same thing every day. He had been with us for 3 weeks when he said it. He was 7. We had just finished dinner, and I had made chicken and rice and green beans, and I asked him what he would like for dinner the next night, and he looked at me and said, chicken and rice and green beans. I said, yes, we had that tonight. He said, I know, that is what we have. I said, what do you mean? He said, chicken and rice and green beans. That is what we have for dinners. He was speaking in the specific calm voice of a child answering an obvious question. I said, Theo, do you think we have chicken and rice and green beans every day? He said, yes. I said, why? He said, because that is what we had last night and the night before. That is how dinner works. You pick a thing and you have that thing. It is easier that way. I said, Theo, at your last house, what did you have for dinner? He said, pasta with red sauce. I said, every night? He said, yes. I said, for how long? He said, since I got there. I said, how long had you been there? He said, 9 months. I said, and before that? He said, chicken nuggets and french fries. I said, every night? He said, yes. I said, for how long? He said, 4 months. I said, Theo, how long have you been eating the same dinner every night? He thought about it. He said, a while, as long as I remember. I said, we do not do that here. We have different things. He said, different every night? I said, different most nights. He said, why? I said, because we like different things. Also because food is interesting. Also because you do not have to pick one thing and eat it forever. He was quiet for a moment. He said, you can have different things? I said, yes. He said, is that allowed? I said, yes. He said, I did not know. I said, I know you didn't. His face did not do relief immediately. It did a thing that was slower. The thing a child's face does when they are recalibrating their understanding of what is available in the world. He said, so tomorrow we could have something different? I said, yes. He said, like what? I said, like anything. He said, what if I don't know what I want? I said, then we figure it out together. He said, what if I don't like it? I said, then we learn something new about what you like. Also, you can always just eat what you like from the plate and not eat the rest. He said, I can do that? I said, yes. He said, at my last house we had to eat everything. I said, here you do not have to eat everything. The conversation continued for approximately 45 minutes. He had questions, many questions, about food and how the kitchen worked and whether the food was always there and whether he was allowed to ask for specific things. Each question revealed something about what the previous houses had been like. I answered each one. I did not let my face do what it was doing internally, which was a specific grief about what his small life had contained in the texture of its ordinary days. After he went to bed, I sat in the kitchen. My husband Alexander came in. I told him about chicken nuggets for 4 months, pasta with red sauce for 9 months. The questions, I said, we are going to vary the food. We are going to let him pick sometimes. We are going to introduce a new thing every week. We are going to make it clear that food is a thing you get to have feelings about and opinions about because those are things he has not had access to. I said, I am going to make a plan for the next month, different every single night for 30 nights. I am not going to tell him. I am going to let him see it. He needs to see that the variety is real and not a one-time event. I made the plan. Night 2 was fish tacos. Night 3 was spaghetti. Night 4 was stir fry. Night 5 was meatloaf. On night 5, Theo said, we have not had the same thing twice. I said, no. He said, we have not had chicken and rice and green beans. I said, we will have it again. It is one thing we have. It is not the only thing. He said, I did not know dinner could be like this. I said, it is going to be like this here. He said, for how long? I said, for as long as you are here. He said, how long am I here? I said, as long as you want to be. He said, that is a long time. I said, it can be. He is 14 now. He eats everything. He has favorites and dislikes and opinions and preferences and the specific food-related personality of a teenager who has been given permission to have one. He asks for specific things and rejects specific things and complains about vegetables and rejoices when we have something he loves. None of this is remarkable. All of it is him inhabiting a relationship with food that is as complicated and ordinary as anyone else's. Sometimes I look at him complaining about a vegetable, and I think about chicken and rice and green beans for a length of time he could not specify, and I think the most private and important thing we have done as his parents is let him develop preferences. It was a Tuesday. Theo was in the kitchen with his phone propped against the backsplash with a recipe on the screen. He wanted to make pad thai from scratch. He was opening cabinets and pulling out rice noodles and peanut butter and lime and brown sugar, lining everything up in order. He said, do we have fish sauce? I said it was behind the soy sauce. He found it, held it up like a trophy. Alexander looked up from the table and said, he is going to use every pan we own. Theo said, that is the cost of greatness. That was the life we built. A 14-year-old making a mess in a kitchen he felt safe in and being funny about it. The next day I got a phone call. A woman's voice. Careful, polite. She said, I am Theo's aunt, his biological aunt. His mother was my sister. I have been looking for him for a long time. I am not trying to cause trouble. I just want to meet him. She said, he is my family. The word family sat in my chest like something heavy. She said it like it was the final word in an argument I had not started. I said I needed time to think. She said, I understand. I just want you to know I am not going away. I told Alexander that night. He said, what does she want exactly? I said, she says she wants to meet him. He said, and what do you think she actually wants? I said, I think she wants to feel like she did not lose him. He said, are we going to tell Theo? I said, not yet. I want to know more about who she is first. I said it like it was reasonable, and maybe it was, but I was doing the thing I swore I would never do. I was making a decision for Theo without Theo. I was telling myself it was protection, but it was also control. It was the same shape as giving a child chicken nuggets for 4 months and never asking what he wanted. I was choosing for him because I was scared of what he would choose. I called the caseworker who had handled Theo's placement. She remembered us. I told her about Esther. She said she was contacted when Theo was originally removed. She did not respond. She was given the opportunity to take placement. She declined. That was 7 years ago. Esther had been given the chance to take Theo when he was 7 and eating the same dinner every night because no one had thought to give him anything different. She had said no. She had not come looking for him when he needed someone. She came after someone else had done the work. After 7 years of different dinners and 45 minutes of answering questions about how a kitchen works and 30 nights of a plan I made sitting in that same kitchen chair. 3 days later, Esther called again. The careful polish was gone. She said, I have a right to know my nephew. I said, you had that right 7 years ago and you did not take it. She was quiet. Then she said, you do not know what I was going through. I said, I know what Theo was going through. He was eating chicken nuggets every night for 4 months in a house that was not yours. She said, that is not fair. I said, none of this has been fair for him. The call ended with a silence long enough that someone had to hang up. It was her. My best friend Rosalie called a week later. Her voice had that specific, careful tone. She said, a woman named Esther reached out to me. She asked me to talk to you. She said, I am not saying she is right. I am saying she is real. And Theo is 14. He is old enough to have a say in this. That landed. I knew Rosalie was right. I knew it in the same part of me that had known 7 years ago that Theo needed to see variety and not just hear about it. Then Esther did the thing that changed everything. I was picking Theo up from school when his teacher came to my car window. She said, there was a woman here earlier asking about Theo. She asked parents if they knew which one was him. We asked her to leave. She left. I knew who it was. My blood went cold. The kind of cold that comes when someone crosses a line you did not think you needed to draw because you assumed it was obvious. I called Esther. She said, I just wanted to see him. I did not talk to him. I said, you do not show up where my son goes to school without my permission. She said, your son. She said it quietly and deliberately, like she was turning each word over and deciding it did not belong to me. She said, he is my blood. I said, he is my son. She said, for now. 2 words. She said them like there was a clock running somewhere and I had not noticed. I said, the adoption is final, Esther. There is no for now. And showing up at a 14-year-old school without telling anyone is not okay. She said, you would not let me see him. What was I supposed to do? I said, wait. She said, you have been figuring it out for weeks. I have been figuring it out for 7 years. That night, Alexander got still and focused in the way he does when he is angry. He said, showing up at his school is not someone who wants to reconnect. That is someone who is not respecting boundaries. I agreed. But something else sat under my agreement. I was not scared of Esther legally. The adoption was final. I was scared that Theo would want to know her, that knowing her would open a door to a version of his story I could not control. I was scared that the life I had built, the 30 nights, the 45 minutes, the 7 years of showing up would not be enough once he saw where he came from. I was scared that love was not the same thing as blood. Then Theo came home from school holding a manila envelope, thick, not a school thing. He said, someone left something in my locker. He opened it, a small photo album. The first photo was a woman holding an infant in a blue blanket, looking down with the face people make when they are holding something they made and cannot believe it is real. The baby was clearly Theo. Then a birthday party with a single candle, frosting on his fingers, laughing. Then a family standing in front of a house, sun out, everyone smiling. The photos looked warm, they looked like love. A note in the back, your family never stopped thinking about you. My name is Esther. I am your aunt. I would like to meet you. Theo looked at me. He said, who is Esther? The thing I had been trying to outrun for weeks had walked into my kitchen in the hands of my son. I said, she called me 2 weeks ago. She is your biological aunt. His face did not do anger right away. It did the math. He said, 2 weeks ago. I said yes. He said, you knew about this for 2 weeks and you did not tell me. I said, I was trying to figure out the right way to handle it. He said, you were handling it without me. He said it in that same calm, clear way he had spoken when he was 7 and told me that chicken and rice and green beans was how dinner works. That steady voice that meant he was telling me something he believed to be completely and obviously true. He said, you told me I get to have opinions about things. You told me I get to choose. Is that only about food? That is the line that broke me open, because he was right. I had built our entire relationship on the idea that he gets to have preferences and choices and a say. I had sat with him for 45 minutes when he was 7 because I believed his opinions mattered, and the first time something scared me, I had done the exact thing I promised I would never do. I had decided for him and called it protection, and it was not protection. It was me being afraid. I said, you are right. I should have told you. He looked at the photos again. He closed the album. He said, I want to meet her. I said, okay. He said, are you mad? I said, no, I am scared. He said, of what? I said, of you finding out that the life before this one was not all bad and wondering if this one is what you want. He looked at the birthday photo, the cake and the frosting and the laughing. He said, these look nice. I said, they do, because they did. I was not going to lie. Then he said, but I do not remember any of this. He said, I remember chicken nuggets for 4 months. I remember pasta for 9 months. I remember you asking me what I wanted for dinner and me not understanding the question. I remember that. He was not saying it to make me feel better. He was saying it because it was true. Memory is not about photos. Memory is about what you lived through and what it taught you about the world. And what Theo remembered was not a birthday cake with a candle. What he remembered was a woman sitting across from him explaining that he was allowed to want things. I said, if you want to meet her, we will make that happen. He took the album and the note to his room. I stood in the kitchen. Then I called Esther. She picked up fast, like she had been waiting. I said, he wants to meet you. We will do this at our house, with me and Alexander present. Esther came on a Saturday. Nice blouse, hair done, gift bag with tissue paper. She walked into the living room where Theo was on the couch. She stopped when she saw him. Her eyes moved across his face the way people look at something they have been imagining for a long time. She said, you look so much like your mother. Theo said, thank you, politely, the way you say things to someone you do not know yet. Esther talked about Theo's mother, her sister. She spoke carefully. She said, she loved you very much. She was not well, but she loved you. Theo said, what happened to her? Esther said, she had problems she could not fix, but that was not about you. Then Esther started talking about the family. Her voice got warmer. She said, we have traditions. Your grandmother makes a specific cake every holiday. Your cousins are around your age. There is a whole world of people who share your face. Then she said, I wish I could have been there sooner. I wish the system had not made it so hard. I said, you were contacted. You chose not to take placement. The room went quiet. Esther said, I was not in a position to take a child. That does not mean I did not want him. I said, I understand that, but the way you have been telling this story leaves out that part. Then Esther leaned forward and said, you could come visit. Stay with me for a weekend. Meet your cousins. Theo said, can I ask you something? Esther said, of course. Theo said, when I was at the house with the chicken nuggets, where were you? Esther Esther blinked. She said, I told you, I was not in a position to, Theo said, and when I was at the house with the pasta and red sauce every night for 9 months. Where were you then? Esther did not answer. Theo said, because someone was there. She was there. He looked at me, right at me, his face steady and clear. He said, she asked me what I wanted for dinner and I did not even know that was a question a person could ask. And she sat with me for 45 minutes and answered every question I had about how a kitchen works. And she made a different meal every night for 30 nights because she wanted me to know that I was allowed to like things. He said, I am glad you are here. I am glad you want to know me, but you should know who my mom is. She is sitting right there. Esther's face did several things at once. Hurt, recognition, something that might have been grief about time she could not get back and chances she did not take. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I can see that. I can see that he is loved. She looked at me, her eyes wet, but not crying. She said, I am sorry about the school. I was desperate. I have been carrying this for 7 years and I did not handle it well. I said, I did not handle it perfectly either. I should have told him about you when you first called. Esther looked at Theo. She said, I would still like to be in your life if you want that. On whatever terms work for your family. Theo looked at me. I nodded. He looked back at Esther. He said, I think I would like that, but I want to take it slow. Esther said, slow is fine. Alexander, who had been quiet the entire time, spoke for the first time. He said, slow is good. We do things deliberately in this house. You will find that out. That night, Theo was in the kitchen. I walked in and he was looking at the photo album. He closed it when he saw me, not secretly, in a finished way. He said, what are we having for dinner tomorrow? I said, I was thinking about trying something new, a soup I have never made. He said, what kind of soup? I told him. He thought about it. He said, that sounds okay, but can we also have bread with it? The good bread? I said, yes. He said, okay, good. He walked out. I stood there. I thought about how the most important thing I ever did for my son was not the big fight or the hard conversation with Esther or the legal protections of adoption. It was asking a 7-year-old what he wanted for dinner and waiting for him to understand that the question was real. I thought about him asking for the good bread and how that small request contained the entire architecture of a life where he knows he is allowed to want things. I did not cry.